Pastor Frederick Haynes, and Democratic candidate for the 30th Congressional District. Thank you so much and welcome to Eye on Politics.
Thank you very much for having me.
So why are you running for Congress?
Well, I feel it's really a call of conscience. I have always served in the public, fighting, as it were, from the outside, especially for those who have no voice, for who Jesus referred to as the least of these. And so the call of conscience came both from the community that as the grapevine was circulating about what Congresswoman Crockett was going to do, there was a push, as it were, for me to run for Congress in her seat. And so combining the community with my own conscience and the fact that the more I thought about it, there was a need for both a moral compass and clarity in this country at this time, and the fact that so many of the things I have fought for and believe in can be brought to pass in the context of legislation in the halls of Congress. And so when I think about what's happening and the fact that we live in a country where, for the most part, too many of us cannot afford to live, as it were. You have 140 plus million Americans who are economically insecure. I heard a stat over the weekend about the fact that child care is now beyond the reach of too many Americans. And so for me, that's a moral issue. When I think about the fact that still the richest nation on earth has so many people who are not only unhoused, but food insecure and living in poverty, again, a moral issue. What really hurts is that instead of finding solutions and working together to make America better, we're in a political climate where ethnic attacks is prioritized over ethical accountability. And so the attacks that continue as we otherize persons who don't look like us, think like us, love like us, all of that has produced a chaotic kind of climate, and I feel there's a need for a moral clock and compass.
So you said a lot, so I want to break that down, but I want to go back and ask you, because how surprised were you that there was this grassroots effort to recruit you to run for this seat?
No, I was not surprised. I was shocked. Again, this is not something that was on my radar, my to-do list, my bucket list. The last thing I ever wanted to do. And so when I was approached, especially after the hearings that took place both in Arlington and Austin, by a number of young people who said, we need you to run for office, I have to be honest, I laughed. And again, it was like, you've got to be kidding me, not me keep looking. And then after—
These were the redistricting hearings.
The redistricting hearings that took place in August, right. And so that was, again, it was hilarious. Me, politician, no. And I can't tell you how many times I said no.
A lot?
A whole lot, yes.
So what made you say yes, finally?
Well, and I hate to admit this, but one of the young people said, Pastor, you've given us every argument for why you should not do this. Have you prayed about it? And I said, don't tell a pastor to pray, okay? That's, I feel this got shifted here. You are in politics and you're saying to a pastor, you need to pray. So of course I was convicted by that. And then I had a conversation with Senator Raphael Warnock, who is both a colleague and friend, but he's also, again, a senator. And so I asked him, I said, why did you do this? You're a pastor of a great church. Why would you do this? And he said, well, I felt called to this work. And he said, that's the question that you have to answer. Are you called to this work? And so through a lot of prayer, consulting with family and friends, a lot of prayer, I feel again called to this work.
And are you going to be continuing to lead your worship services on Sunday morning?
Oh yes, without question.
How are you going to be able, because that's a lot of work, I would imagine, in preparation. Right. So how are you going to do that and balance the rest of the workload being in DC pretty much all week?
Right. Well, again, I talked to Senator Warnock because I wanted to find out, how are you doing this? And so he let me know that in the 5 years that he has served, he's only missed 2 Sundays at Ebenezer because of his Senate responsibilities. And so given the schedule where you're there from Monday through Thursday night, you have the opportunity to get back home to serve, is what he shared with me. And then he talked about the importance of having a strong staff at home, and that's what I'm blessed with at the church. And so again, I feel strongly called to this. Basically, as I began to assess my own trajectory, my ministry trajectory, where there's been a strong sense of fighting for justice, and you cannot fight for justice without understanding how politics works. And so given all of those dynamics, I just felt that, again, there was a call to conscience, that my trajectory was leading me in this direction. And I want to thank those who believed in me, who saw something I did not see. And I also want to thank, God for, I guess, confirming what so many people were saying.
Was Congresswoman Crockett, who's a member of your church, was she among those who urged you to run?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, we were in prayer about her desire, not even a desire, but her contemplating, running for the Senate seat. And so our conversations for much of the summer, the fall, were strictly around what she would do. And it was not until close to the filing deadline where she started hearing, the rumors that people were approaching me should she run for Senate, that, she said, are you doing this? And so I said, I don't know. And I said, so what do you think? And so she said, well, I would support you should you like to do this. I said, it's not a matter of like. I don't like the idea of doing this. This is not what I have been doing with my life. And so she said, well, I'm here for you. And so she has been wonderfully supportive in all of this. She has given, sage advice. But again, that happened after I filed. But she really, I have to be honest, she did not push me one way or the other.
Last question on this particular topic. There was, a lot of reporting that Congresswoman Mark Vesey was looking at the 30th Congressional District as well because of the musical chairs
Right.
and the redistricting, et cetera. And so did you have any conversations with him before you made your decision?
Yeah, Congressman Vesey is a good man. He reached out to me, as a matter of fact, as I was being, courted for this run. And I did not get a chance to speak to him until right after I had filed. And so we did have a conversation after I filed. And again, he's a very good man, and we have worked together on a number of things. And so once he and I had a conversation, I believe that, he made the decision not to run for this seat.
He didn't want to run against you.
I don't know about that. I think that he just made a different decision because, again, we have worked together.
Sure.
And, he's a good man.
And let me ask you about the primary that you're in. You're facing Barbara Mallory Caraway, who's been a former Dallas City Council member, I'm sure you know, and former state representative.
Right.
And so why should Democratic voters select you over her? What do you bring to the table, so to speak, because she has stressed her legislative experience?
Right, right. And again, she has that. I have nothing against Barbara Mallory Caraway. She served well when she was a part of the city council. She also served well as state representative, and I'm sure I voted for her in all of those instances. What I will say, I bring to the table 40 plus years of public service. One of the things that I've heard so much recently is that those who are closest to the problems are the ones who are closest to the solutions. And I believe that with all my heart. So all of these years where I have been giving voice to, fighting for those who are experiencing the problems up close and personal, be it our fight against the payday loan industry that has inundated and targeted certain communities that are unbanked, underbanked as it were, underserved. Again, closest to the problem, and so I was fighting for a solution because I was hearing the voices of the people, the cries of the people. Recently, I had a health crisis where I was hospitalized and had surgery because of a prostate issue. And again, closest to the problem, I had the opportunity to talk with a number of hospital workers, people who work in hospitals who honestly could not afford to have a health crisis. And so when you're close to the problems, I believe you are close to the solution. So I do not have her legislative experience, but I do have experience in public service. I do have experience hearing the cries of the people. I do have experience fighting for those persons and then working to create solutions to make communities better, to make our country better, to make our world better. That's the kind of experience I bring.
So if you are to be elected, what bills, what laws are you going to be working on to try to change things and improve the lives of people?
Well, for me, number one, in light of the fact that I think all of us have accepted the reality that we're in an affordability crisis. It costs too much to live in this country. And so we must push for a real, true cost of living understanding in terms of our policies, and then that will govern what I call a living wage, not a minimum wage, but a living wage. I'm not throwing out some arbitrary figures like $20 and $25 an hour, because what it costs to live in Dallas is not the same as what it may cost to live in Midland. We have to have a true cost of living measure if we are going to attack this affordability crisis. And so that will be one of the first priorities that I will have legislatively, and that is to ascertain what is the true cost of living across the country in various areas, and then push for living wages that reflect where those individuals live. You cannot attack a true cost of living or the affordability crisis without understanding that we are in a bad way when it comes to health care. I am for Medicare for all. Ultimately, I believe in universal health care. I had the misfortune and fortune of getting sick when I was a student at Oxford in England one summer, and I won't forget it because I had asthma real bad. I'm rushed to the hospital in their ambulance service, and then when I was the recipient of their quality services, I'm checked out. I pull out my wallet in order to pay for the services that had been rendered that I was quite pleased with. And I won't forget it because they laughed at me. And they said, "Oh, you must be from the United States. Health care is a right here. It's not a privilege just for the few." That vision grabbed me because I'm in a country where health care that persons in Congress are privileged to experience is not the same health care opportunity that too many in District 30 don't have access to. And so on the one hand, I'm pushing for Medicare for all. At the same time, I have a vision that is the result of my own experience in another country where I learned that universal health care should be a right and not a privilege. And then I've got to say this, I'm also in a district, District 30, where unfortunately the mortality rate has nothing to do with one's genetic code but the zip code. And so I read recently that, there are places in District 30 that are 15 minutes from the northern part of Dallas, for example, where the mortality rate is so much higher. As a matter of fact, the life expectancy is some 15 to 20 years less because of environmental injustice and because of the fact that we have not taken seriously climate change. We have not taken seriously what is happening in this country while we allow certain communities to suffer because of archaic and I dare say racist zoning laws, as well as a lack of responsible politics as it relates to attacking climate change.
So let me ask you about the Medicare for All. Right now, the country has $37 trillion in debt.
Yeah,
Having Medicare for All is going to be very expensive.
of course.
And Medicare right now is not in the best shape.
Yeah,
And so I'm wondering, how do you pay for that?
yeah. So we begin with reassessing our priorities. Right now, we are, with that $37 trillion debt, we are also paying an exorbitant amount to recruit workers for ICE. And as a consequence, you have ICE workers who are getting a $50,000 bonus, not to mention a six-figure salary. Parenthetically, that's a lot more than we pay our teachers. What does that say about our priorities? But to get back to the point, the money that we are investing militarily, Martin King Jr. talked about militarism as one of the evil triplets of this nation before he was assassinated. And we are seeing the manifestation of that not only with imperial politics, the colonizing of other countries, as it were, with that agenda, but we're also seeing it as we attack Americans in this country through a two-armed ICE, an overly armed ICE. We're using all of that money that we are using to be the superpower in the nation that has now turned its weaponry on its own citizens. That's money that could be used to build a healthcare system for all. And let me also say this, it's so important that we get the middleman, these profiteering insurance agencies, out of the healthcare system. As long as they are the middle person who are squeezing, as it were, money out of the pockets of people who can barely afford it, we are going to have a difficult time having health care, universal health care, let alone health care and Medicare for all.
So let me ask you about ICE, because you brought it up,
Yeah.
and obviously what we're seeing, the backlash about the Trump administration's policies and what's going on in Minneapolis. Should ICE be abolished, in your opinion?
Without a question. ICE must be abolished. You cannot reform something that has developed such a pattern. There's a pattern of behavior from the agents. There's a pattern of recruitment that we are not really aware of in a country where transparency is the only way democracy can thrive. And so we don't know who they are recruiting. We don't know the training that they are receiving. And then on top of all of that, when you think about the fact that there have been at least 10 persons since September who have been killed by ICE agents. Some have said the number is much higher. That does not represent isolated tragedies. That represents a pattern, a trend. And that means that there is a system that needs to be overhauled if we are serious about immigration reform, if we are serious about protecting our borders. It cannot be done in the way that it is done. You have Americans who are being killed while peacefully protesting, and then you have an administration that lies no matter what the cameras say, and that has to be abolished.
Because there's been a lot of discussion, how can you say, there's peaceful protest if they're getting in the way of law enforcement doing their operations? So you have that on one hand. What do you say to that?
Well, and let me just say, I'm on my way to Minneapolis for a service of healing, and the conversations I have with those who are on the ground contradict the narrative that puts them out as persons who are being disruptive. Instead, they are trying to disrupt, as it were, what ICE is doing that is violent, that is inhumane, and they are doing it peacefully. My definition of peaceful disruption goes back to what took place during the Civil Rights Movement, where, you know, John Lewis and Amelia Boynton and others found themselves marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that was seen, a narrative was established that they were being disruptive when instead they were being peaceful, but the real violence was the real violence was being perpetrated by those in the name of law enforcement who had come up with an arbitrary line that they could not cross. And so I reject narratives that say that the persons who are basically trying to protect democracy and protect persons who are being victimized by ICE are the ones who are violent.
What do you make of the fact that the border is pretty much been shut down? The southern border, we've seen a dramatic decrease, obviously, of the people coming in here illegally. What do you make of that, and how do you, if you abolish ICE, how do you still do that, still handle that and prevent that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm calling for is comprehensive, real immigration reform that also takes a look at our foreign policy, because unfortunately, when you look at the history of this country, in too many instances, we have been a destabilizing force through our policies in the very countries that have produced the kind of political chaos that has resulted in persons trying to escape from a destabilized government, trying to come to a country that has as its symbol the Statue of Liberty, extending a warm welcome to those who are tired and yearning to breathe free. And so a part of America has to take a good look at what we've done that has created chaos in governments, that has produced persons deciding, hey, I've got to get out of here. And so again, I'm calling for a comprehensive immigration reform, and that comprehensive immigration reform will start with examining our foreign policy that in too many instances has been guilty of creating chaos instead of peace in many of the countries that the president has, you know, characterized as S-hole countries. And so when we begin there, what we're doing is looking at the spider as opposed to getting upset about the spider webs.
Do you have any countries in mind as far as, you know, what you were just talking about, the U.S. policies creating that situation?
Well, I mean, so many, Haiti, Venezuela.
So you disagree with the U.S. going in and capturing Maduro?
Without question. First of all, Venezuela is a sovereign country, and what was done was, and I like the language, it was a kidnapping. Kidnapping is a crime. And so what has been done in kidnapping the leader of a sovereign nation with an agenda of profiteering from oil, there's nothing moral about that. That is unethical, that is immoral, and it's not how a country is great. Especially when you define greatness by service. That's what my faith tradition does. Greatness is defined by the service you render, not by the power you wield over others. And so kidnapping another nation's leader and prosecuting that leader, I reject that outright.
Some people hearing that may say, he was a murderous dictator. And he shouldn't have been in there. He was a delegitimate president. What do you say to that?
Well, again, narratives are created in order to further agendas. And one of the things that has taken place throughout history, unfortunately, and the political climate we find ourselves in majors in it, and that is creating narratives to justify whatever actions take place. And so a narrative was created about the president of Venezuela. There are narratives that we could legitimately create about the current occupant of the White House, who also was convicted convicted by a court of law, and he ran in order to avoid, as it were, facing the consequences of that law. So it's real difficult for me to judge another nation's leader when it is their leader, when our own leader has also been convicted of crimes that he is not facing consequences of breaking those laws for.
Do you think President Trump should be impeached?
Without a doubt.
Why?
Well, number one, because of the fact that when we look at the tariffs that many have said are not just illegal, but they have hurt this country. When we think about the fact that one of the first things he did when he became president was to not only create all of these executive orders that many question the legality of, but on top of that, persons who engaged in an insurrection on January the 6th, where lives were lost, they were basically set free. They were pardoned. And we don't know if some of those persons are now ICE agents, parenthetically, but the bottom line is not only was he affirming that what took place January 6th, that most people will agree, if their eyes are honest, that he instigated, he provided the motivation, and January 6th, people were hurt, lives were lost. When we talk about persons who are responsible for law and order, some of them got killed that day, and he was behind that. And so as far as I'm concerned, when you get in office and then you release the very persons who engaged in such a democratic disruption, for me you deserve to be impeached.
Frederick Haynes, Democratic candidate for the 30th Congressional District. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.